Hi, I'm Avaris. I am here with Under the Thorns, visual novel by EVERIUM, and we're reading Chapter 5. Despite the medication's valiant stand, the clock ticked closer for Robert, his illness a relentless shadow. The manor fell under a shroud of melancholy as news of his condition spread through. His successor, Edward, became busy and rarely visited the mausoleum. The mausoleum has never looked so empty before. One day, while cleaning the mausoleum, I felt a presence watching me. I looked up and met Olivia's piercing gaze. Her eyes, filled with distrust, sent shivers down my spine. It feels as if I am to blame. For a brief moment, I wondered if Edward had endured this scrutiny all his life. An overwhelming loneliness deluged over me. Back in the servants' hall, anxious whispers greeted my return. "What's going on?" "Clara." Alice's pale face confirmed my deepest fears. The day we had dreaded with every fiber of our being had arrived. The door to Robert's private chamber was open. Edward, a shadow of his former self, leaned against the doorway, his gaze lost in a desolate distance. I pushed through the crowd, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. His once vibrant eyes were now clouded with a profound grief, reflecting the wreckage of a shattered world. I reached him, offering my arm as a fragile support. My eyes darted across the crowded scene, searching for any additional aid in this bleak and unforgiving reality. "Also, Dad dead. I'm sorry. It sucks." "Anyone mind you join me in helping?" My voice faltered as I spoke. Everyone stared at me, their mouths forbiddingly tight. I blinked confusedly. They felt like complete strangers. Well, they kinda are. We don't know hardly anyone by name over here. Their alienation felt like a bottomless pit opening beneath me. "This is not the time for entertainment." Oh, she looked angry. Olivia, her eyes narrowed to slits, bellowed up the stairs, the sound echoing like a whip crack in the stillness. The servants, previously lounging in languid indifference, were jolted upright, their gazes darting nervously towards the source of the commotion. With a swift, purposeful stride, Olivia brushed past Edward, her gaze sweeping the room like a predator assessing its prey. She pressed her lips into a firm line. In a deliberate, almost ritualistic gesture, she reached out and touched her forehead with the tips of her fingers. That simple gesture, though fleeting, was laden with unspoken meaning, painting a picture of the deceased so vivid, so eerily real. Her gaze lingered on Edward, scrutinizing his colorless complexion. A ripple of emotion crossed the still surface of her eyes, a single stone disturbing the calm, but the ripples faded away just as quickly, and the surface returned to its former placidity, leaving no trace of the turmoil beneath. "Alan, kindly escort the young lord to his chambers at once." With a curt nod to the head butler, Olivia entrusted Edward to his attention. Her eyes then shifted to me, their depths swirling with an unknown intensity that set my heart thrumming a frantic rhythm. "I am fired for fraternization, I assume." Her grip, strong and unyielding, held me captive, demanding my full attention. The depths of her eyes held an atrocity so profound, so sickening, that it paralyzed me with terror. "Clara." "Clara!" Yes, ma'am." "Did you view or share the apothecary's prescribed medications?" Olivia's grip on my shoulders felt like two iron manacles, constricting not just my flesh, but my ability to breathe, like a curse. "Oh, did you do something?" My mind flitted back to Edward's face, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. Unable to vocalize anything, I vigorously shook my head in denial. Olivia tilted her head, her eyes boring into mine with an intensity that rivaled the midday sun, a slow, cold smile, predatory as a viper slithering across a sun-baked sand, crept across her lips. "Yeah, she totally killed him." "I see." Then, as abruptly as it came, her strength ebbed away. "And is she going to frame Clara for the murder, I wonder?" She smiled one last time and turned away, leaving me gulping for air and confused. Crushed by the overwhelming pressure, my legs gave way, and I crumpled to the ground. Amidst the oblivious crowd, I slowly pulled myself upright, each breath a painful struggle. A flurry of activity descended upon the manor, shattering its usual stillness. Servants bustled like industrious ants, their movements driven by urgency. Some, with grim faces, tackled the daunting task of preparing for a funeral. Others, their tasks no less important, turned their attention to welcoming the attendees, ensuring every detail was impeccable. Even the ivy, a tenacious vine that had long claimed the main entrance as its own, had succumbed to the gardener's determined efforts, revealing the weathered wall beneath. Even the mausoleum, once a place of solitude for Edward and me, now echoed with the footsteps of other servants, their presence a grim reminder of the impending funeral. But for some reason, the manor, though cleaner and more beautiful than it had been in the past few months, could not shake off the oppressive cloak of gloom that clung to it like a shroud. Somehow it seems to have gotten even worse. My brow was slick with sweat, and I used the worn sleeve of my shirt to wipe it away. A sigh threatened to escape my lips, but I swallowed it down, the weight of worry heavy in my gut. Olivia was a whirlwind of insanity that day. Did you view or share the apothecary's prescribed medications? Then the memory of the apothecary's words echoed in my mind, as clear as the hand-scrawled warning on the parchment he'd given me. He'd warned in his note about the forbidden ingredients, the ones a patient in Robert's condition should never be exposed to. The apothecary had confirmed that he'd crafted the medications according to Olivia's precise instructions. No way. Yes way, Clara. I called this last chapter. Yes, I did. A sinister picture gave me chills, my fingers unconsciously reaching up to soothe a stray hand of hair that had escaped my braid, its coolness providing a fleeting distraction from the unsettling image. We have changed locations. Across the room, Edward moved with a chilling purpose, his face etched with a grim premonition. He seemed to preordain the death of his father, Robert. A list detailing the impending arrival of those who would bear witness to the tragedy, letters bearing a black wax seal, like a harbinger of doom, had been dispatched, calling upon acquaintances from all corners of the land. One by one, the guests began to arrive. They were a motley crew, drawn to the manor by a morbid curiosity and the weight of unspoken expectations. At the appointed hour, we were all summoned to the grand hall, the air thick with a palpable tension that threatened to suffocate. As we stood in a respectful line, heads bowed in silent tribute, a footman would announce each arrival in a monotonous voice. Then Edward would emerge, his expression a mask of stoicism, and greet each visitor with a practiced cordiality.
遠方までありがとうございます。
I offer my sincerest gratitude for your presence today. Your journey must have been long, and I am humbled by your dedication to my father's memory. Please, Lord Edward, do not express such burdens. I can hardly imagine what you must be going through. Indeed, he seemed in such good health a few years back. His passing is truly... Allow me to escort your esteemed lordships to the guest chambers. The head butler, a figure of quiet efficiency, chose precisely the best moment to interject. With a subtle hand gesture, he drew their attention away from their conversation. I watched from the periphery as Edward reluctantly released his grip on the guest's hand, a fleeting bitter smile gracing his lips before he turned away. Following the head butler's lead, I shifted my gaze down to the intricate pattern of the floor, my mind racing with the implications of what I had just witnessed. Yeah, it's like they don't even give him time to potentially connect with any of his father's old friends who are here for him or his dad or any... There's just so much weirdness going on here. And all the I don't know what's going on. The air still crackled with the energy of their exchange, and I knew that much remained unarticulated between them. As the guests trailed after the butler, their voices, though kept low, carried easily across the opulent room. There's an unsettling aura to this place, wouldn't you agree? My skin crawls within these walls. The air itself feels heavy with something unseen. It's almost like someone died here. Robert always spoke of the manor's burden. Perhaps we should offer our respects and depart before the curse claims another. Does everyone at this entire just know about some curse or another? Why is Clara the only one who's not in the know? Or is everyone just like generic, I don't know, place feels cursed, it's just bad vibes, you know, whatevs. We shall see. We shall see. And then they retire to the dining room area. And mid-conversation, Clara says, "And they dared utter such slander in public." Curse. Ridiculous. If such a thing as a curse existed, I would have been buried a long time ago. She brings up a very good point, though. It's sort of... the curse, as it were, may not actually be a thing. It's just... there's a lot of weirdness around it. We'll see how things develop. A frustrated groan escaped my lips as Tomek shuffled toward me, a tray laden with food held in one hand. Thomas paused, his gaze catching mine, one eyebrow arching quizzically. "Didn't you know? I'm quite surprised. Didn't his lord tell you?" "Are you saying that you're one of those who buys into their whispers?" "I get it, so that's why you've been sticking around him for so long." I am not following this conversation at all. He seemed to understand my situation, setting the tray down in front of me with a gentle thud before sinking onto the seat beside me. Leaning close, he spoke in a hushed tones. But the remainder of his words were a claptrap. "Edward is a son of Satan," said he. His explanation, rambling on about the bizarre occurrences plaguing the manor, felt hollow and unconvincing. Yeah, seriously, that's like paper-thin weirdness right there. "Lord Robert has been killed by Edward, who's been draining his soul." Sounds more like Olivia poisoned him, but okay, Thomas, okay. "You can't be serious." "You too have witnessed the shadows, haven't you? Which have never been debunked as a Scooby-Doo, someone totally running around on Clara's orders." "I have." Oh, and come to think of it, Olivia was the first and one of the few people we actually saw the shadows together with. The rest were all kind of at a distance, don't approach one of the rules, etc. There's been nothing proven, really. "Then you must have seen who the shadows resemble." "Just people. We never really got a good description of them. That's the whole point of calling them shadows." "There was a time when I could have sworn I saw the shadow take the form of Edward. It was brief, obscured by the flickering firelight, but the image remained etched in my memory nonetheless." New information, Clara! That might have been interesting to know. "Nonetheless, just because it took his form doesn't mean he did it." "You're completely bewitched by Edward." "And you are completely insane." At that point, the very thought of food turned my stomach. Nausea churned within me, making it impossible to even contemplate taking a bite. As I stormed out of the dining room, my eyes landed on Edward at the foot of the staircase. He was absorbed in reviewing the list of guests with the head butler, yet even the ever-stoic servant seemed to maintain a defined distance. Everyone but me, was actively avoiding contact with Edward in fear of a curse that didn't exist. As I stood there, bathed in the cold silence of the hallway, I couldn't help but feel a bitter sense of betrayal. The funeral for Lord Robert had just concluded, but the servants, like myself, were not permitted to witness the ceremony. Also sus. Tradition dictated such separation, though necessity often demanded exceptions. Today I was one of those exceptions, my lowly status momentarily elevated by the task of cleaning the aftermath of mourning. As I swept, I couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation from the gathered staff. The air buzzed with whispers and speculation, not so much about the departed Robert, but about his son, Edward. The recently revealed contents of Lord Robert's will had ignited a wildfire of curiosity and gossip within the manor walls. It seemed the guests, despite their outward solemnity, were far more preoccupied with the prospect of inheritance than with grief. "I trust the legal instruments regarding the distribution of the estate have been duly prepared. Perhaps you have some insight into the allocation of the various properties?" Indeed, the entailment stipulates the manor house for the young Lord Edward. However, the disposition of the remaining estates remains somewhat opaque. My brow furrowed with confusion at the perplexing discussion. Nah, makes perfect sense, Victorian era, very concerned with the inheritance and all that. Abruptly, a commotion erupted in the distance. Edward had seized the document containing Lord Robert's will from the head butler and was closely examining it. Curious, I turned toward the source of the disturbance, piecing together the situation from the murmurs of the gathered guests. Is that indeed Edward? His expression remains clouded. Aye, it is. The terms of his father's will, it seems, have cast a shadow upon his countenance. Indeed, whispers abound that the document made no mention of him. Also sus. Very sus. Especially since we know Olivia had a hand in Robert's death somehow. Poor him. Was it truly so shocking that he wasn't named in the will? Suddenly, Olivia stormed in, snatching the will from Edward's grasp. Oh, she mad. Before I could ponder the propriety of her actions, she began berating him with a venomous tongue. Such disrespect in the face of loss is beyond comprehension. Have some decency. Give that lecture to some of the other people we've heard talking. My goodness, lady.
Olivia, 私はただただお父さんが
Olivia, did my father truly not have... Am I so insignificant? I doubt it was that. It seems like there were weird conspiring things against you and stuff. I don't know. But yeah, it is actually super odd. And, I mean, I have so many questions about this, but we just don't know enough about the situation. We never even met Robert. No idea who he is, what kind of relationship he had with his son. It's all very... And I have to question what all went on with the death and the will, with the whole involvement we know about the apothecary and Olivia and all the other sus things going on. Anyway, very suspicious. The legal document is finalized, sir. This is a formal setting, and while your grief is acknowledged, it might be best to reserve personal expressions for a more private environment. Edward clenched his fists, his jaw set tight. Tears welled up in his eyes, threatening to spill over at any moment. Then, with the remnants of his dignity clinging to him like tattered clothes, he turned and walked away. Yeah, seriously, poor Edward in this situation. The guests, fanning themselves with practiced nonchalance, breathed a collective sigh of relief. No one made a move to follow him. Olivia, with a self-assured air, addressed the remaining guests as if she were the undisputed mistress of the manor. Actually, was she potentially something? I don't know, there's a lot of weirdness around here. Who knows what's what? Feeling an overwhelming sense of unease, I turned and hurried after Edward. I found him standing alone in a secluded corner of the garden, his head bowed low. Though his shoulders were squared, I could see the tremor running through his clenched fists. Blood oozed from a wound on his palm, crimson staining his skin. I quickly reached out and gently pulled his hand away.
Hana!
Let go of... Our eyes met, a silent exchange passing between us. He blinked rapidly, his expression filled with a mixture of surprise and vulnerability. Tears streamed down his pale cheeks, his face contorted in a mask of anguish. In an attempt to shield him from prying eyes, I offered him solace, allowing him to bury his head in my shoulder. Protecting his last shred of dignity was the least I could do. For a moment he remained frozen, then reached up with trembling hands to clutch my shoulders in a tight embrace. A choked sob escaped his lips, but quickly died down. Raising his head, he pushed me away, his face regaining its usual stoicism.
Clara, 見たんだね.
You were there, weren't you? You saw what happened. Though countless questions swirled in my mind, I held my tongue, fearing that my words might only exacerbate his pain. He responded to my stillness with a bitter smile.
あなたはいつも好奇心旺盛なのに.
I know you. You've been curious about everything. As his hand began to withdraw, I instinctively reached out and caught it. I'm not curious about anything. Which has been a problem for this whole reading experience, Clara. He turned his gaze downwards, his eyes reflecting a deep sadness. We stood there in silence for a long time, the only sound the echo of departing guests across the garden. It seemed the funeral was concluded, even though Edward, the rightful heir, who would normally receive their respects, was absent, his whereabouts completely ignored. I felt an urge to rush towards them, grab them by the shoulders, and scream out my outrage, but I held back, my anger dissolving into a profound sadness for Edward. He only continued to trace the outline of my face with his eyes. I met his gaze then with a determined tug, pulled away. "Won't you join the others, my lord?"
僕はその権利があるのか?
I don't deserve to stand among them. Of course you do. You are the lord of this manor.
お父さんにも捨てられた子が?
Lord, the title feels hollow for a son who's been deserted by his own father.
クララ、僕は疲れた。これ以上は戦いたくもないし、祈りたくもない。
I'm so tired, Clara. Fights drain me, and begging feels like salt in old wounds. My lord, who dares to make you beg?
何もかもが、みんな僕をそうさせているじゃないか。
Everyone, everything. A jolt of surprise coursed through Edward as the forceful words escaped his own lips. He shook his head in an attempt to dispel the confusion swirling within him, then hesitantly drew my hand to his forehead. He slowly dropped to his knees, his head bowed low.
分かっているじゃないか。この邸宅に僕の味方はいないよ。ただ君だけが僕を人のように扱ってくれるんだ。
You know it, that I walk these halls like a ghost in my own inheritance. No one sees me, not truly, except you. His voice, when he spoke, held no trace of accusation, but a deep self-recrimination that resonated within me like a mournful echo. It was clear beyond any doubt that he was blaming himself for the pain he had to endure. Then I will stay by your side. The unwavering vow I had uttered elicited a sharp shake of his head, refusal etched on his face. He took a step back, his eyes filled with the complex mix of emotions I couldn't quite decipher.
家を出て、もっといい場所に行きなさい、クララ。
Leave the manor for the better, Clara.
古い屋敷に閉じ込められて、死ぬのは僕で十分だから。
This place has swallowed my life. Don't let it do the same to you. Wait, Lord! As I turned to follow him, his retreating figure disappeared into the depths of the garden. A chilling question stopped me dead in my tracks. Must I remain by his side? Until death do us part? I mean, I joked about you getting married, but honestly, I think you guys should. My hand instinctively clutched at the fabric of my skirt, knuckles turning white with tension. Frustration welled up, forcing me to squeeze my eyes shut. I don't know. I knew the path ahead would be fraught with hardship and uncertainty, a thorny journey filled with challenges. Yet, even amidst the swirling doubts and anxieties, a single desire burned brightly within me, to hold on to Edward, to be his anchor in the storm, his solace in the darkness. And that was chapter 5. Yeah, there's just so much weirdness around the mystery thing. It's the description that we get of Olivia. She definitely, it's basically painted in black and white that she totally killed the father, Mr. Robert, whoever it was. And for all we know, she had something to do with the will as well, because when he went to try and examine it, Olivia was the one who rushed over there and snatched it out of his hands, like, no, you don't even get to look at it. You know, under the guise of how dare you think about the inheritance at this hour, but it's like, apparently everyone is. And Edward's main concern at this stage was just, my dad didn't even mention me, cry. Man. So interesting. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching /reading, listening, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks so much. Bye.